Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It's another episode of What Now, my series, Motivational Relief for Creatives. And today I actually have a special guest. His name is Marlon Peterson. He's a very extraordinary person. And as you probably could have seen already, okay, so people are logging in now. As you could have seen or read already, he actually will be able to talk about how it is to be locked up, but we will also addressing some serious issues that have been going on for a long time, but recently have been in the news again, unfortunately, because the injustice is still going on and happening in the United States. Now, I'm not trying to make this a serious talk, because this is still motivational relief. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and usually this is to inspire people to help them deal with, the stress of a pandemic or, health issues and worries about the world, losing jobs, etc. So we will still be focused on stays inspired and motivated. That's something I just wanted to let everyone know. And Marlon's actually joining us already. So right on time. Great. Let's see if the connection works. Yay.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm here.
Thank you for joining me.
For sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was just giving a little background information about the nature of this particular talk, because usually my talks are, all the time my talks are about inspiration and motivation for people during this this time in the world that we're all dealing with. And so I had asked you to be a guest on this talk as well. And then with the recent events happening, the murder of George Floyd, I wanted to get into that later on a little bit and hear your perspective on the situation, but also focusing on more solutions and not just the problems. But first of all, I wanted to tell you, you are loved and you are valued. I made it a point to tell all the Black men in my circle this, so because it's needed today.
Yeah. I mean, it's first of all, good afternoon to good morning, good afternoon. We're good evening, depending on where you're listening to this at the time frame. The time zone. If you're paying any attention to what's happening in the news, most recent news here in America, it's much of the same, actually, right? It's just that it's compounded in a time when there's less distraction, right?
Right.
There aren't sports or parties and all those things to be able to sort of, distract our attention from what's happening. And you compound it with, there's a lot of tragedy. There's a lot of loss, lives lost. There are a lot of people whose financial lives have been completely disrupted, turned upside down. So, all this is happening in the mid of, more Black people being killed by the hands of white folks and law enforcement. And it's a lot to deal with, right? It's a lot to do. I think even those like myself who have been engaged in this sort of work, it never comes to a point where we're like, we've dealt with this in the past. So, it's not as, I know how to deal with this. Right? I don't think it ever gets that way. I think we might intellectually do that. I think when we're in public spaces and when leadership from us, we do that. But I think for me, I can say personally, I see me in the place of that person. So it becomes much more of a personal connection to the event.
Right. Okay. Well, let's get into that a little bit later, because I first want to talk about you. I've met you through Malik last year, and so for people that are tuned in, I met Marlon last year when he came to visit Amsterdam with his cousin. We hung out for a whole day. We were connected through a mutual friend, and we had a blast. and
Huh.
we had a really good time. We ate a lot that day. That's all I remember. And so fast forward, we're following each other, and I noticed what he was doing because we weren't really. I don't think at the time we were really talking about serious things because we were just happy-go-lucky going through Amsterdam that day. And so it was very interesting to me because I don't know many people that are fighting the fight like you do, but also from experience. So I watched your TED Talk. For those who are watching, please watch his TED Talk. It's not long, but it's it struck me while watching it. So tell us a little bit about your background and why I want you to be a guest talking about how it is to be locked up. We're all in quarantine, we're all locked down, but we have no idea if we haven't been through what you have been through.
So yes, Amsterdam was a great time. I love Amsterdam. I was supposed to come back in November, but plans have changed. It's interesting. The way I actually met some mutual friend Malik. I know Malik through the work that I do. So Malik was engaged in criminal justice work using his, his influence and his platform to push forth issues that impact people who've been through the justice system here in America. So I'm somebody who's been through the justice, who've been incarcerated here in America. I did 10 years in prison in my entire 20s. Believe it or not, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I did my entire 20s inside of prisons. It completely, and I should also give some more context. I'm here based in Brooklyn, New York. I want to give some context of where I'm from, of immigrant parents from the Caribbean, Trinidad to be specific. And the youngest of three, no one else in my family has ever been involved with the criminal justice system. I was born at 19 and initially facing a life sentence. Initially, it was a group of us, and we were all facing the same sentence. I was facing life in prison. And after 3 years of remand, it was reduced to 12 years instead of the life sentence. So out of 12 years in New York State, you have to do 85% of your time unless you get into more trouble. And so I did, out of 85% of the time, you have to do a little bit over 10 years, which I did. And it, profoundly prepared me, right? And I say profoundly prepared me in that there's nothing about that experience that was good in terms of the prison itself and experiences, right, in terms of the place. But I've dealt with a lot of trying to understand. People often ask me, Pate, if you didn't go to prison, you wouldn't have been doing the work that you're doing now. And so in some ways, prison propels you into this sort of stuff.
Right.
And I guess I get into a little bit about the work that I do too, in detail. But I just want to say this thing. I know you're asking the questions, but even in this moment of like the virus and when the entire planet was locked down, I don't think anybody would say thank you for this virus.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think anybody would say. I think people would say, in the moment of the virus, I got closer to my family. Or I learned how to do this. I learned a new language, whatever it is. But nobody would say thank you to the virus. People would be much more thankful for what they were able to do in spite of the virus.
Yes.
And that's why I say profoundly prepared me for so much. And so for what I've been able to do despite that experience.
Yes. That's a great way to phrase that, because any hardship that we go through should prepare you to make something out of it. I actually just posted that yesterday. Like, out of every negative situation is a positive outcome. You just have to recognize it and manifest it and make it work for you. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's easier said than done. But, I haven't not nearly been through anything like you have, but I have had my own hardships. Everybody goes through their own thing. And if you don't learn from it, or if you don't see the lesson in it, or if you don't come out a better person, then it really was for nothing. That's how I always see it. And you don't know what your purpose is until you walk that path. So do you believe that you are walking a path, and that you have walked a path that steered you into this direction of what you're doing right now?
Yes. And it's taken me a long time to accept that. I think that your purposes always exist, right? I think we step into it at some point, right? We step into your purpose. And I didn't sit down at some point in my life and say, I want to work on criminal justice issues. I want to deal with issues. I want to work with issues of race. Like I didn't think that. I didn't, as a kid, I never envisioned that. Right.
Right.
That me reflecting on my experiences though, as I was going through things. And prison was just one. I mean, it was a huge chunk, but you know, I went through so much before prison.
Right.
So for me, I had to look back on these things instead of saying like, why me, because that took up a huge part of my, even, you know, before I accepted my incarceration. It took years for me to accept that. It was always like, why me? It shouldn't have been me. It should have been me. Why me? And then it came to a point, well, accepting like, this is me. This is where I'm at. I think, what am I supposed to be learning from this? And I think the more I started listening to what I needed to be learning from this moment is when I realized I was listening to what my purpose was to do, you know?
So the whole why me, I mean, I know that every one of us have had that moment in their lives, like why me? But do you feel like, did you accept it by taking your responsibility for being in that situation?
Yeah, definitely. To give context to what it was, I mean, me and myself and my 4 co-defendants, we were involved in a robbery that resulted in a double homicide. And it was tragic. There's no way around that. It was tragic. Right. And though, you know, I'm not the person that pulled the trigger, I was still like, I was part of that brain trust. Right. You know what I mean? And I think the why me part was that, well, I didn't do that. I didn't shoot these people. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a weapon. But I shouldn't have got this. And, you know, always one other side, I always say in life, you don't get to choose in life, you get to make your choices, but you don't get to choose your consequences, right? Yeah. So in that sense, I didn't necessarily have to choose my consequences. And that was the acceptance part. Like, this is what it is, right? I can sit here and say it shouldn't have been, I shouldn't have got this much time, I shouldn't have this, that, and the third. Right. But that wasn't healthy for me. Because I was just sort of in a stagnation period. I wasn't trying to do anything with myself. And I think when I realized that, not accepting that I'm a bad person. I'm not saying accepting that I'm a bad person. Right. I'm what people say I am, but accepting that I made decisions. I made certain decisions, and I made bad decisions, and accepting that. I think for me, that helped me realize to make better decisions now. Because here's the thing, Pay, I think it's important for us to always be I think the thing to always be aware of is the fact that we are capable of making profoundly great, wonderful choices, and we are also capable of making profoundly terrible choices. Yes. And that's power there. Because I think, for me, I denied that I couldn't do the one thing or the other. And when you deny it, you're running away from that possibility. And I'm saying that accept the possibility and then choose not to do it. Yes.
So basically also think before you act. You know, it's something that your mom always tells you to do when you're little. But it's just interesting to me because the acceptance part and the accepting that you're not a bad person based off of one decision, that is something that a lot of people don't realize. And not in such a major way where you are seen as a criminal, where you were the criminal at the point. And so one of the things that struck with me during your TED Talk was the fact that people write you off. People write people off when they end up in the system. Once you go to jail, that's done. You don't get a second chance. Nobody gives you a second chance. And so there's also a difference between obviously the criminal justice system in the United States and over here, but we'll get into that a little later. So you come to the point, you accepted it, and at that point you were sort of at peace with where you are. You have to make the best of it. What did you do, or what helped you to stay, I don't want to say positive, but to maintain in the situation where you are incarcerated?
Finding a way to be of use to other people. So I did, that's the 10 years out. For the last 5-6 years or so, I worked in a part of the jail that was called the Transitional Services Center. And it was myself and a group of other guys. Maybe it would fluctuate anywhere between 7 to 15 different guys who worked in this part of the jail, where there were classrooms, and we helped prepare other people for release. And so that would sometimes include, that included facilitating classes, everything from community development and career development and family reintegration to one-on-one counseling and support, helping creating resumes for people creating parole packets for them, and engineering a college program with college students came in and interacted with the men, incarcerated men. All those things are the things that I can say got me through.
Right.
Because it was, I think the selfless nature of wanting to just help somebody, and because I'm somebody who prior to jail, I did well academically, right?
Right.
As a younger person. So, and sadly, most people in prison, however, don't have a high school education. So there's some talents, you might call it, that I had that I felt like, hey, I could be of use here. And by doing that, it helped me because I learned so much more about myself. And I learned about a lot of the breaking down biases that I had. Because, inside, when I was working with folks, well, it didn't matter what crime they had, right? Everything from the robbery to the child molestation. Like I worked with all of these folks, right? And for me was trying to understand them beyond what it is that they did. And that's why now I'm so big about like looking deeper into people, because I interacted with people who I still probably won't even want to invite into my home at the moment, right? But I still see their humanity, right? And
exactly.
And that got me through.
So again, I'm not comparing any of the situations that I'm mentioning to the situation that you were in, but I'm trying to build that bridge between how to stay inspired and how to stay motivated during this lockdown, pandemic, whatever. So one of the things you said, helping other people, it's something that I did in the first 2 weeks of the lockdown. I was cooking for single nurses with kids that had to stay at home. They had night shifts and they were tired, and the kids had special needs and stuff. And so people were like, oh, that's so good of you. But I wasn't necessarily doing it for them. I was also doing it to make me feel okay during this time, to feel like I'm contributing, I'm being of use, like you said. Those are the things that I think help people get out of their own head, get out of their own situation or frustration. So I can definitely understand that would be one of the things that you were focusing on.
Yeah.
So at what point did you start with the program, for the youth program?
Yeah. So shout out to Dr. Nadia Lopez. She's a good friend of mine, childhood friend. So I would say maybe halfway at some point. So at the same time, I was actually, before I started working in the Transitional Services Center, Dr. Nadia Lopez, a childhood friend of mine, she's a teacher, and she reached out to me and asked me to write. She's dealing with her young folks, middle-aged school students who come from similar neighborhoods I came from in Brooklyn, and she was having difficulties connecting with them. So she knew me. I was inside, and she reached out to me in a letter and asked me if I could write like a letter to her kids that she can read with some words of wisdom. And initially, I was hesitant to do it because I didn't see like I was worth anything. I was like, is there somebody else outside?
Right.
Want to reach to me? I'm in jail. I'm in jail, right? Like, I don't think they want to hear from me. That was really about me and my own lack of self-worth. But so I ended up writing a letter. Eventually wrote the letter, and the first time I got a response back 2 weeks after my letter went out, I got 17 letters. I don't know. Somehow in my head, I didn't know that they were going to write me back, and they ended up writing me back. And after that, Dr. Lopez, she sent me a book about curriculum development. And so I like devoured the book and information. Yeah. From there, I learned how to create curriculum. So I would create a lesson plan that she implemented in her class on during her character education segment of her class every week. And so it became a letter correspondence back and forth between myself and her students. Just like a real full circle. A couple of weeks ago, Nadia and we had these Instagram chats as well, and we got to be on with one of the students who is now a PhD graduate.
Wow.
And I hadn't spoken to her, right? And just that she connected to us through social media, and we got to speak to her. So I mean, that I should also say, prior to even working with the men inside, like that was the thing that catalyzed what I can do. I think I told her this recently. I said that exposed me to my possibilities. I didn't see much possibilities, and seeing the fact those young folks needed to hear from me when we were going, like they were expressive. And if I took too long to get back, they were writing letters like, you took a little bit too long. Why you writing me back fast enough? And that for me, and I ended up writing. It would end up being up to 50 letters I'll be writing back and forth.
Wow.
Every 2 weeks or so, and it was the joy of my day inside, and I shared it with the people I was close to inside to like give them some hope in it. I mean, I think it's a power, right? Like, and there was no money, and she didn't like guarantee you a job. Come out with just, hey, can you do this? And I said, yeah, and I didn't realize how much I would get out of it.
Yeah,
I actually went through it.
So when you finally got released, did that help you settle back into society? Just having that going on for you, at least?
Yeah, for sure, because
most people have nothing when they come out, and so they don't know where to start. And you had at least something going on from the inside until you got out. Yeah,
that was energy. Like they gave me energy, and it was a connection to the outside world. So when I came home, like I was interacting with young people on a regular basis anyway, even though I had never seen them. They were running on the phone. There were no visits, but it was interacting with them, and that helped me, as I often say, that my transition back home was almost transitionless, at least in that aspect. And within a month of me being home, that program, I had now brought it into a school. So, Lopez, Nadia was now assistant principal by the time I had come home. And so she had a little bit more authority. So it became, so I had my own I had my own classroom of students I worked with. And even though at that time I didn't really have any money, I might have had like enough money just to take the train in or some snack to eat. That was the highlight of my week because it was community for me. Even though these kids were half my age, they provided a level of community that I needed. And I wasn't doing it for me, but that's just what inevitably happened. And it really prepared me in terms of just communication skills. Because now I get to speak in front of audiences all over the place. And like I earned my chops with young folks. And if you know anything about 11, 12-year-olds, try speaking to a group of 11, 12-year-olds on a consistent period, and you'll understand what I mean, where I had to earn my chops speaking with them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were all that age at some point. So, so what inspires you today? Like, what are some of the biggest things that you get inspired by nowadays?
It's interesting. I think what inspires me now is the realization of how powerful I am. I don't mean that. So that
I'm sorry to cut in, but that's a long way between feeling like you're nobody, like you're shit, to knowing how powerful you are. That is like a journey, like a big journey.
Yeah, well, that's why I said that experience inside profoundly prepared me to accept how powerful it was. I think, first of all, me realizing how powerful I am is not something that everyone can't also experience, right? It's just that everybody has that ability to step into that. I think part of the biggest thing is, particularly in these moments when we have, in terms of violence that's happening in our communities, you can easily feel as if you're powerless. And if you're raised in an environment where, the state, powers that be, law enforcement, some teachers are telling you ain't shit, either explicitly or implicitly, you can begin to believe that and believe that you're powerless to it. And I think the journey for me to where I'm at now, what inspires me is that all the things I was able to do in terms of positive things, particularly whether it be working with other people inside, working with the young folks, the college students, all that sort of stuff, I realized none of that stuff was by mistake. Meaning that, like, I can replicate that again.
Yeah.
Like, you can replicate the good shit that you do. And I think that's power in that, because for me, I'm inspired by, I'm much more intentional. Because I know what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
As I said before, you can do profoundly horrible things or terrible decisions or profoundly great decisions. I also know how profoundly powerful I am because of the way I've been able to impact people in a positive way. So that's inspiring for me, because I think as humans, we got to understand how powerful we are. Because that's the thing that that's the thing that takes us to the next step, stepping into your purpose, understand how powerful you are. Your purpose is nothing without your power. And we all are capable of that.
And
we all have it within us.
Yeah, and that is something that not a lot of people understand, which is also one of the things that will make you, I guess, it makes you more easy to make a bad decision, because you don't understand the power of your decision. So if you don't understand it, then then you're not really consciously thinking about what the impact is, what the consequences are. So beyond the whole mom telling you think before you act, it's literally understanding not just how it can affect you, but how it can affect others around you. Mm-hmm. Which is why being an example, being a role model is not just, hey, let's be good, but it's being aware of all the mannerisms, all your words, all your actions, and the impact that it has of people around you, which is why I try to stay positive. Even if I affect one person with my positivity, that my work is done. You know, I did my job today. I don't deal well with negative things. So I saw somebody saying the self-fulfilling prophecy, repeating affirmations to yourself, speaking things into existence, obviously in a positive way. That helps me, at least. I don't know, I'm sure it helps everyone else.
Yeah, it should. We have the power to I'll give you an example. When I was about 17, 18, right? I remember saying to my sister, my older sister, that I didn't know how, but I was like, I don't think I'm gonna make it to 21. I remember saying that to her, and I wasn't involved. I want to give nobody the example that I was like some big gangbang out in the street, some big drug dealer. I wasn't none of that, right? I was involved. I was in the neighborhood, and I got to touch different things, right? But I remember saying that to her. She was crying. She said, "Why would you say that?" etc. And I couldn't really articulate why. I just had that feeling.
Yeah.
So many ways it happened, right? I didn't make it. I didn't die, but I didn't make it in the free world to 21.
Right.
And talking about the power of like projecting your future, like so many ways. Yeah. Projecting your own future, and I think that's the power in our tongue, and that's why I like words so much. That's why I write, because I understand the power in the words that we create, and they can create realities.
Yeah. Well, words. They always say your tongue is a weapon. Words are weapons. I actually read your the article about humans in cages, and so for those who haven't read that, the link is on your Instagram, on Marlon Peterson Instagram, and it talks about your visit to refugee camps in Jordan, and the comparison you make between prison and refugee camps was very interesting to me. Can you tell us a little bit about how that made you feel and what your conclusions are?
So I had the opportunity to visit 2 refugee camps in Jordan last fall, I believe. And one was a Palestinian refugee camp, another one was a Syrian refugee camp. And if you know anything about refugees, there are over 70 million displaced people or refugees in the world. And being in those camps in both days, and they're very different. The Palestinian refugee camp is not well funded, is not taken care of. People don't have enough care for it. And you understand globally how people feel about, in terms of Palestine and Israel. And then the Syrian one is much better funded. No matter how funded they are, when I walked into them, particularly the Syrian refugee camp, which was supposedly better, if that's such a term in that case.
Right.
It literally felt like I walked in the clinic, and I got to speak to the security, and I was in they had the yard where the kids play, and the classrooms, and everything about me. It felt like I've been here before.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the feeling. I mean, but I felt like I've been here before. Meaning I've been to prison before, right? And I spent a great deal of my life there, and I couldn't help but feel the same feelings being inside of those spaces. And true indeed, like they're running away from, persecution, potential termination, in their home countries. But the refugee camps are places of complete uncertainty. You have no idea how long you're going to be there. Yeah. Right? You have no idea, and that is not your home. But
there's no sentence. You don't know if you can get early release or
Yeah. So it reminds me so much of those experiences, and that in America there's 70 million people in America with a criminal conviction. I'm trying to juxtapose the 70 million people with a criminal conviction and 70 million people in refugee camps, and it just doesn't seem like, it seems as if humans, we haven't evolved to a place where we can create sanctuaries that don't include incarceration of some kind.
Yeah. So that leads us, oh, good. I see questions coming in. So if you have a question for Marlon, please make sure you put it in the question box and we can get to that. And that just made me lose my train of thoughts. Oh yeah. So prison, okay. So over here in the Netherlands, they have closed, I think 17 prisons in the past years because they're empty. All of our prisons, to my knowledge, are government owned, not private institutions. We do not lock up people to get money. They do not get paid for every inmate. So that's already one of the biggest differences between America, the United States, and the Netherlands. Is this something that you have researched, or have you visited prisons outside the US to see if there could be something that we can change in America about that? Or I don't know. I don't know anything, so I'm asking.
Well, I visited prisons outside of America, but not in Europe, only in the Caribbean and in Africa, actually, in South Africa. I visited prisons there. And but this is what I do know, at least in terms of, I say one thing about the Amsterdam experience. One thing I can say is that you all have definitely reduced your population, you've closed places, but the people that are in incarceration are majority minority, many people who are from Surinamese descent. So there's something about the incarceration of the minority, of the darker people. No matter where you go in the world, that's sort of like a through line. But in terms of, I think lessons to be learned simple. One simple lesson to learn is that you don't need these facilities, close them down, right? I think in America, that's something that we're not so good at. And, if you don't have a need, we don't keep them open, right? And I think that's one of the things we can learn in terms of what you all would have done. But also, here's the thing. It's so much deeper than closing the actual prison. I had a mentor of mine that would always say there are no prison problems, there are only community problems. And the issues that we have with incarceration are only the only manifestation of what's happening in the communities.
Yes.
Right? We haven't figured out, we haven't gotten to the root, we haven't dealt with the things that's going on in our communities in the first place. People are in jail in the first place from certain areas, and why we have figured out why we are okay with the criminalization of certain people. Like, we're okay with the fact that there's a demographic that you arrest more in Amsterdam than any other demographic. Like, that's something to be thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Or here in America, or wherever you at. Like,
it doesn't matter where you are,
And that's the problem. We only think about, well, these people are doing these things. These people are doing these things. Right or wrong, our government had decided that it's pretty much okay that a certain demographic of people are inside of cages. And that speaks to the idea, like, the projected worthlessness of certain people. Yeah.
So that brings me to the fact that, you're talking about, what did you say? Because somebody said 7 million, but did you say how many million people are?
70 million.
Okay, 70 million. So as far as people being incarcerated in the United States, regardless of the demographic, we already know that it's minorities that are taking up the most of it, the population. But we're also talking about innocent people. That, like, every day there's somebody finally, declared innocent after, 20, 30, 40 years. You get a couple million, that's it. But you lost, like, your life, you missed your kids growing up or whatever. You missed half a life. So we're not even talking about that. And then now going into the murder of George Floyd, would he have been thrown in jail? Would that have been less bad? Of course, he'd be still alive, but the fact is he was treated wrong for doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you made your when you made your video earlier this week, speaking about why are people, reacting in a certain way because of the messages that they get growing up, or, messages that have been pushed out into the communities for years. That to me was an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people really, really think about. So for the people that are now tuned in, can you elaborate a little bit on what your thought was behind that?
Yeah, I mean, some of our work has also included gun violence prevention. So I've created, youth program around gun violence. It was called like a violence interrupter at one point, engaging in community conflicts and written and done a lot of things around violence. Gun violence particularly, and seeing how much we harm each other on our own in terms of community violence. And, I was somebody who, and this is part of the video that I made, I was at one point the person who would feel as if, these kids need to just stop. They need to stop being in these gangs. That's the issue. That, or bad. They didn't have fathers in their lives. That's the issue. And those, and what I've gone, through traveling, through more research, I've really gone to realize that it's so much deeper than those things. Those things are minor. That right. when you live in particular societies where the government, let's say in American society, where there's nothing you can do in America that would get people to feel like the Second Amendment, which is a gun rights amendment, that we don't need that. Like, we believe in the need of violence. We're committed to violence. We're committed to it. And you can't expect for a country built on that ethos for it to not to trickle down to everyone within it. So the mere fact that people in our communities react to different conditions in a violent way is not excusable, but it's a reason. It's one of the reasons we understand it, because that's what the government tells us.
Yeah.
It tells that we should resort to violence. So we're not acting outside of the American fabric. In fact, I'm writing a book now, and one of the parts of it I speak about, like, we need to be un-American, right? And I say we need to be un-American, because being un-American means being more humane. That's how I see it. And being American means being violent.
That's interesting because, me growing up over here, watching American movies and shows, it was always weird to me how everybody can just pick up a gun, because that's not how we were raised. I don't think I've ever seen a gun other than at the gun range. I've never seen a random gun in a club, or I don't deal with crazy criminal people, but it's just, I've just never seen a gun. I'm just saying, just like I've never seen cocaine. People are looking at me like, you've never seen cocaine? No, I don't know. Where should I see cocaine? It's just, to me, that was so weird how people just have guns in their homes to protect themselves. It's so American to me.
Very much.
So when you say you have to be un-American, I completely feel that, because I'm not American, and I'm not saying I have more humanity than the next American, but it's not normal for me to have a gun or to think about getting a gun.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Paige. When I think I realized that idea about being un-American was when we had the Newtown shooting here, when all the kids were shot up in that school in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember at that point, I said, oh, well, yeah, things are going to change. People, and they were white kids. I was like, and they white kids, so it's definitely going to change. And after that, I saw the head of the NRA at the time, Wayne LaPierre, make a speech about we need to have more guns in schools. Yeah. And I said, oh, shit. I was like, I can't believe it. It's like, in this moment, that's your answer? That we need more weapons? That's your answer in this moment?
I saw that, This
moment. And I think it was at that point that's, we're in like a crumbling institution. I think it's in our best interest to be much more intentional about saying things like we need to be un-American, because we're within a crumbling institution. Like the values in which this country has been able to somewhat succeed off, and that's a relative comment.
Yeah.
It can't exist. Like, it's cancerous. It cannot exist this way. It can't continue. And the other thing is that when people really start realizing their worth, when you realize your worth, you won't accept certain things anymore. If you're in a relationship and your partner is not treating you right, and at some point you get to the point where I work more on this, you're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
You may leave. You're going to do something about it. And what I'm saying, as particularly Black people, and the Black Lives Matter mantra is about Black people saying we're worth something.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, the more we realize and step into our own power, going back to that power conversation, the less we're going to accept. And I think that's like so much of a warning signal, but in a loving way.
It's for me, looking from the outside in, what I see happening, and this is just my observation, it's nowhere maybe truth or fact, this is my observation, is that the more Black people stand up, the more Black Lives Matter movement grows and speaks out, the more white Americans are arming themselves, because they seem to be more scared, and they seem to really be afraid of their worth dropping, which is, we can exist next to each other. Just because I'm worth something doesn't mean I say you're shit. But that's how they now see it, as a threat, which for me, again, looking from the outside in, I feel like it's building up to an explosion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a group of people in this country, speaking about, certain white folks that are delusional.
Yeah.
They feel like they're going to disappear, that, like we're going to be just as quote unquote powerful as them. They're delusional. They're delusional in that, not so much we're more powerful than them, but that they're not the standard we're trying to get to. But either way, they're delusional. I think that delusional makes them also much more dangerous.
Yeah.
Makes them much more dangerous. But I also think our power makes us much more dangerous too. So in terms of that, like, powder keg, I do think that's a powder keg. That's why I'm saying that, like, we need to be honest about the ethos of America. We're not honest about it. We like to believe in this wonderful story where the founding fathers came and, they created this document, and we're going to leave England and create this free and Statue of Liberty, etc. Yeah. But they're missing a whole bunch of stuff we're missing. Yeah. And it's not so much we're missing because the history doesn't exist. It's because it's sort of a cognitive dissonance. We're comfort. Yeah. We create a comfort in lies.
Yeah, exactly. It's not real. It's like a fake.
It's a fake story.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
He ain't real. I don't care.
It's make believe. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I saw Ski making a remark about America being the youngest country, and it probably has a lot to learn. I don't know. I mean, that's a fact, but I don't know if I agree for that being a reason or an excuse for America being the way it is, because as humans, we should know better. Let me get to the question. There's a question.
When you tell a lie long enough, you believe it.
I'm sorry?
So you tell a lie often enough, you tend to believe it.
Especially if you keep telling it to yourself, then you're going to convince others. Izzy says, do you ever lose hope? And if so, how do you deal with those thoughts? That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes hope evades. Sometimes hope seems far away. I don't think I lose it, but there are times when it seems far away, further away than I would want it to feel. Like moments like what's happening here in America now with the recent violence.
States and territories of this country.
I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second.
The African American population and the number of COVID deaths.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I have this weird thing on my TV. It just comes back on. Anyways, but yeah, I think that. Oh yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Hope is far away.
Yeah, hope is far away. I think in moments like this, what's happening right now in the country, because it's so close to me. Like, I'm not involved with certain things, but police still want to mess with me. Police still do, and I know it's very possible. It could be me or my family member. Yeah. And I think there are moments like this where because we've tried so many things before, the protest policy, including Black people in law enforcement or in leadership, and the shit's still happening. It makes you feel like hope is a little bit further away, but I don't lose it, right? I think that, as a friend said to me, encouraged me some years ago. She's another writer, Brittany Cooper. You should check her out. She has a book called Eloquent Rage. You should check it out. She once said to me, Marlon, you've gotten through much more worse than this. You can get through this. Yeah. And it was regarding something else that was going on in my life personally at the time, but I think her saying that to me just always stood out to me that, I've been through a lot of stuff, right? Individually, I've been through a lot. And I have been able to, I can look back at that in my rearview mirror now. Yeah. Right? I can look at it in the rearview mirror, and I think that is evidence that, like, hope is real and not unreal.
Yeah.
Right? It's evidence. 'Cause I've been in some very unreal, some very hopeless moments, right?
Yeah.
And I've been able to get to this point now. So I think that, like, I thank you
You
for
put
that
it in
question.
perspective.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that question, because hope, I don't want to make people feel like that there aren't moments when I feel like I'm losing hope. I don't want you to make, because that's also not real. That's also untrue. I think that I have tools to deal with those moments.
Yeah.
But like those feelings sometimes do come.
So, you having been in a 10 years in jail, do you have moments of fear of the police when you see what's going on, and do you fear that you might get locked up for something you didn't do? Because that's now a very realistic, I mean, aside from getting killed, you can still get locked up.
I fear my reaction. I've been harassed driving here. I've had police, break my car, off of nothing, literally.
How do you respond to that?
I mean, there are times when, I was just speaking to someone earlier today about this. There are times when I can literally say, and to be honest with you, that there are times when I know that I am not responding according to the training that I have in terms of knowing your rights and knowing how to speak to police. Because in the moment, they are it's triggering. Like, I know what they're doing. I know they're just playing with me. I know they're trying to just kill time on their shit. I know they're acting out on their sort of discriminations and internal prejudices and their own brokenness. Yeah. And I think because I know that, there are times when I feel like I should tell them that, right? And that's the part that I said I'm more fearful. I'm not fearful of police. Okay. I have no reason to be fearful of police. I'm more fearful of me not being in control of myself around them.
That's a good one. That we should all be that in any situation where your first response is never, if it's an emotional response, it's never good. So talking about your purpose now, what is your number one priority in changing the system?
Come on, pay guys, what's my number one priority in changing the system?
Well, what are some of your priorities in changing the system? What are you actively working on? And if you're on your deathbed, you want to have at least accomplished it or be close to it and pass on the torch for accomplishment. Because I don't know if that's going to change in one lifetime, but
I really, honestly, it's really, really high level. I really want a rewriting of the American Constitution. And I know and be clear, me saying this is not, I'm not the first. There are many people on the right, conservatives, who also want to do that for different reasons. But I think that when people speak about what, reimagine justice or reimagine, like, we have to completely recreate something different.
Yeah.
That's why earlier, if you look at my stories, I posted a quote from the Declaration of Independence. Not so much that I believe in the Declaration of Independence, but there's something in that document where people are saying, well, if tyranny is so terrible by the government, then it's your duty as people of the government to abolish it. Now, so you asked me what's the one thing I want to do. Now, I can't do that, but I think we need to, for my children, if I have children, for my nieces and nephews to go on in this country, like, we can't expect them to just keep fixing this unfixable foundation. It's like trying to build a house. You can't keep building the houses on mud and keep saying we just keep trying to rebuild a house. It's mud there. It's just not going to last.
You got to make a different foundation. Yeah. You
have to make a completely different foundation. Yeah. It's untenable. It's insane to keep trying to do that.
Because I'm looking at the time and I have a few questions. Okay, so what are some of, aside from the book, which you posted that your editor's words, and it made me very curious about the book, so I'm definitely going to pick it up once it's out. What are some of other current projects that you're now actively working on?
You should definitely listen to my podcast, Decarcerated. Decarcerated Podcast, you can catch it anywhere, and it highlights the journeys of success of people who have done time in jails and prisons. So you should definitely check that out. We are in conversation. I say we, myself and a colleague, are working to bring these issues of justice, but connecting them across boundaries, across continents. So we're in conversation with some folks in New Zealand, and Australia to create a convening, to engineer convening around issues of justice, but lessons to be learned outside of America, right? I think you have a question. Oftentimes people think in the criminal justice space we need to learn what America is doing. I don't know why we need to learn from what we're doing. America is the problem.
Yeah. Don't look at America for the role modeling in this case.
Yeah, and not only those countries, but also indigenous communities within those countries as well, right? Because there's racial hierarchies everywhere you go, actually.
Yes.
You know that. But to kind of look at indigenous practices from other parts of the world that we can sort of infuse into what we do here. So I just want to give a shout out to Marcus in New Zealand. I mean, I don't know what time it is there. I think they're like 24 hours ahead of us here.
Not that far. It's about 10 hours from over here. So 16, yeah.
So I mean, so those are two of the things. And I said the book. I mean, honestly, the book has consumed most of my time over the last couple of years. It's literally the most skin peeling work I've ever done.
Yeah, I believe it.
And I mean, I hope it makes some sense. I hope it impacts some people in the world.
I know it will. Your 7-minute TED Talk already did. So can you imagine a whole book? I'm just saying. Yeah.
I never thought about that. Thank you, Pay. I never even thought about it like that.
No, yeah, I'm saying like when I went to your TED Talk, it's only, when you think about it, it's only 7.5 minutes, and it just really, it hit me. It really hit me, and you have to understand, I am not nowhere in your field of work. So for me, I'm just interested in what my friend is doing, and I know that you can add inspiration and motivation based off of your experience and the work that you do. So I'm very curious about all of it. But it really hit me. And
well, I said, go ahead.
I told you about my friend, a Black rock star. He's in here. I think he would be a great guest for the podcast. With his insights about the system over here, but also in the Caribbean, because he's been to Curacao, visited prisons and stuff, and he's doing programs as well. He just left a comment that he's interested in the programs that you lead at school. So I'm going to connect you both so you guys can talk. He also wrote a book, and
though, just say this. You said that not in the same line of work. I think ultimately, like, you're in the place of creating your creator. I mean, that's part of in the fly for this. I think I can put myself in that space too, because literally, like, what we need in terms of moving forward, with in terms of hope, is that creative. Like, that's the part of us that we need more than the intellectual side.
Yeah.
Right. I think we focus too much on the intellectual side. The creative part is what the artistry is. The things that are the cloth of what we need to, like, create this garment of justice, right? And so I just want to say, like, we're much more aligned than you might initially think.
Yeah. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in your life so far?
Woo!
Nobody ever asked you that question?
No, not the biggest lesson. They always ask me, like, lessons about prison or that sort of stuff.
No, for you, like a lesson that you carry with you and keep implementing it because that's something that is always applicable, or, I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that it's okay to love.
Yeah, that's a nice one. And you are worthy.
Love in. And it's okay to let love in.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful lesson. Wrapping it up a little bit, in this pandemic, what is something that you can say to people that are now watching or watching later to encourage them during this stressful time where people also deal with mental, stress and physical stress, being locked up? What is one of the things or a couple of things that you can give out as advice to stay sane?
Yeah. Be good to yourself. I've been telling people a lot. So you have to be good to yourself. And I mean, be good to yourself. I'm not talking about in terms of, like, self-care Sundays or giving yourself a hug and all that. Do that stuff too. But I mean, be good to yourself in, like, when you make mistakes or you don't follow a routine that you had or an assignment that you're supposed to complete or what have you. Be good to yourself. And it sounds like the simplest thing, but it's the hardest thing. you have to be good to yourself, because, you know, we shouldn't expect anybody to be good to us if we're not good to ourselves. And we can't expect ourselves to be good to others, not in our fullest sense, if we're not good to ourselves. Because, like, you know, this existence that we have is the only one we got this tight. And this existence in this format is what we got now. And we got to be thankful for that and show gratitude. I think in this moment here, when there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of trauma happening, you know, the health crisis, this is something that we have never seen in in modern history, right? Yeah. And in the midst of all of it, we got to be thankful for what we have, and we got to be good to ourselves because of what we may have. Even if it's little, we got to be good to ourselves. It's the one thing that can propel us to the next day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I recognize myself in it. I was mad at myself for the longest for making all these bad decisions in my life that got me into bad situations. And I thought at one point I wasn't worthy because I was just a dumbass making dumb decisions, going from bad to worse. And so I have punished myself for a long time, making deliberate bad decisions because I thought, whatever, I'm not going to be good enough anyway. I will fuck up anyway. It's too late for me. So I made deliberate bad decisions, and it took me therapy and you know, love to be happy with me and to forgive myself for the mistakes that I made. And I also know why I did those things. I have traced it back to my trauma, to my issues. And we can get into it further. Like, that's issues that were passed down generational from, you know, my parents being immigrants and blah, blah, blah. So forgive yourself for the bad decisions because you are still worthy. And if you live today, then you still have a chance tomorrow.
Yeah, you know, I think, I don't know if this is a closeout, but, you know, James Baldwin had it's a TV interview that I love, and they asked him about, you know, the condition of the Negro in America. I'm saying Negro because that's the term he used back in the 60s. And he had said something along the lines of, you know, he said white people need to figure out why it is they needed to create a nigger in the first place. And the reason why I'm bringing that, where I'm going with this is this. There's a level of white people not being good to themselves. Yeah. Which is why they create all the harm and injustice throughout the planet. Like, they take their trauma everywhere. Like, black people, we be doing it in our little ghetto, we be fucking up in the ghetto, whatever. It's not an excuse, but we do our shit in our community. They take their shit everywhere. Yeah. So they take our shit and colonize places on that trauma. Yeah. And I'm just saying, like, they haven't been good enough to themselves. They haven't forgiven themselves, and which is why they refuse to believe in the truth that's in front of them. Yes. And I think just sort of taking that from that level to our own personal level, like, we don't want to replicate that. That's why we have to be good to ourselves, because we don't want to. It's very easy for the oppressed to become the oppressor. And I think for us to not do that, to intervene, like, we have to focus solely. We have to overdo it on being good to ourselves. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm getting the countdown. I feel like we can still talk about a lot of things. I'm getting the Instagram countdown. But I really want to thank you for your information, your knowledge, your experience, sharing your journey. I'm happy that we have you, and and again, as my Black friend, I truly appreciate you, and I love you, and I value you. And that is truth. So thank you, babe. Take that with you today. Thank you for showing me a great show. Myself and Osa, my cousin, a great time. I know. You guys have to come back, man. You guys have to come back. Like, seriously. Like, we were supposed to do your birthday, but we'll just postpone it and we'll do it. Oh, I was also going to ask you to give us a little steel pan action to lighten up the mood, but I only got like a minute left, so. Part two. I got my steel pan here. You can see a little bit. Yeah, but again, I'm so thankful to have you in my life right now, and thank you, Malik. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I hope this was somewhat inspirational and enlightening. Hope everybody stays safe, and I'll see you guys at the next live. Thank you so much, Marlon. Have a wonderful day. I love you. Bye.